And here comes Milwaukee. Forbes another three. Oh, no! This is the Random Scrub Heat Podcast.
Welcome one, welcome all. The first pod of the Random Scrub Heat Podcast in 2025, and it might be the last, because today is Friday, January 11th, when you're listening to this, and the Miami Heat are dead. Heat culture, dead. The Jimmy Butler era, dead. ... Maybe. I don't really know. No one really knows, because Jimmy Butler officially asked for a trade following a blowout loss to the Pacers, and things got pretty ugly from there. He said he wants to get his joy back. They said, can you get your joy back here? He said, not on the court. Nope, probably not. So this is a little interesting game of chicken that the Heat seem to be playing, because they then suspended Jimmy Butler for 7 games. Looked for a trade, didn't like the return. The Suns said, he wants to be here. We'll give you Bradley Beal. And the Heat said, no, thanks. We don't want that depreciating asset, because we do want a lot of depreciating assets, but not that one. So they're now saying that Jimmy Butler might come back to the team following the suspension. And then if they don't like anything from there, they'll just play it out. It's weird, Harry. I'm here with Harry, and it's just me and Harry. And we're going to be bouncing ideas off of each other here. So let me set the table here to ask a question, because this is now the 4th time that Pat Riley has supposedly driven out a star from the Heat. He did it with Shaq. He did it with LeBron. He did it with Wade. And it's ironically the 4th time also that Jimmy Butler has driven himself out of a place, first with Chicago, then Minnesota, and then Philadelphia, and now Miami. Supposedly, I know Philadelphia was a sign and trade. Same difference. Doesn't matter. I want to ask the question of who's in the right here, because that was kind of the whole thing on Heat Twitter, right? And Heat media, and just genuine conversation on ESPN, because the sport places like Fox Sports and ESPN doesn't care about the Heat when they're good. They only care about them when they're bad, and they can get some juicy clickbait off. So, Harry, who do you think is really in the right here? And do you think Jimmy Butler's actually going to come back and play for the team at the end of this 7-game suspension?
Yeah, I'm not sure. And the other part that I thought you brought up that was interesting was, even though it was a very different scenario, I mean, they also had kind of issues with Bosch on his, career-ending injury, and the way that he felt with like the team and him trying to come back. And they were saying, go find a doctor who will let you play. Like, there was some tension there before they settled things out.
Chris wanted to come back and play
after Bosch retired. So here are my thoughts on the situation. I don't know who's right and who's wrong. I know that you're dealing with 2 very stubborn entities that never seem to really learn from what's going on. So Jimmy wearing out his welcome is not surprising. He's done that everywhere he's been. He's obviously had his most success with the Heat. Obviously, they benefited a lot from his success. But you're just dealing with people that don't seem to really understand. I don't know. They talk about like, this is a family. This is something like, and there just seems to be so many miscommunications. Like,
I mean, that is kind of like family.
Maybe that is. Maybe
being honest.
Maybe everyone's too close, and there's not enough like objectivity in issues like this. Because in my opinion, over the summer, Jimmy has every right to ask for an extra year. Like, any player can ask for more money whenever that opportunity arises. I'm never going to sit here and say player X doesn't deserve the money that he's requesting. That's his right. His agent's allowed to do that, and that's what Jimmy and his agent did. The Heat, also being okay, said, no thanks, man. Like, we didn't really love the way you played last year. I think it was, it's kind of unfortunate to do that after he gets hurt in a play-in game, which you shouldn't be in if you won any of 12 games last year in which they could have won, which is every season with the Heat. And, but they're allowed to say, no, we don't want to pay you another $52 million on top of the possibly $100 million we owe you. He has the player option next year. At that point in time, it was saying the Heat are not going to play until they see what Jimmy does, and Jimmy's going to be a good soldier, quote unquote, whatever. That is the time where both parties should realize that the split is coming. The amicable divorce, or whatever you want to call it, is on the horizon. And that's when they should have the conversation. At the point when the Heat can possibly look for teams that might be interested, there are a plethora of third or fourth teams you could use if you're looking for some kind of salary dump, which you're going to most likely need the way the NBA is trending with the new cap. And in any trade involving, high salaries like Jimmy Butler making $48 million. And that would have been the smart approach. They could have asked Jimmy where he wanted to go. They could have looked around. They could have come back with packages that make the most sense for the team. And they could have presented 3 options to his agent, and they could have picked what made the most sense. And we could have all moved on. Fans would have been happy because they picked a direction. Jimmy would have been happy because he was going to where he wanted to go. And the Heat, for the first time in 6 years, would have looked like they had some type of positive forward-looking direction. They pretend that Jimmy Butler is going to be fine going out there every night. Mind you, I saw someone be like, first the Heat said they could win without they can still compete without Jimmy. And then you have other people saying like he doesn't try hard enough, that's why they're losing some nights. They lost to Detroit on the road when Jimmy Butler had 37 points, 19 rebounds, and 10 assists. Like, you could not ask for a player to have a better stat line to put his imprint more on a game, and they lost that game. So I think it's okay to admit that even with Jimmy at his absolute peak, this team is not going anywhere. We've seen Jimmy at the height of his powers with a better roster and a team that wasn't tired of each other, and they couldn't do anything. So it's okay to admit 2 years after a crazy finals run that it's over. And I think the inability to admit that stuff is a fault on everyone. It's obviously a fault on the Heat that they just can't realize when it's over or when it's okay to take a year off, collect some assets, figure out the next iteration of the plan.
And that plays against their mindset, right? Their whole spiel is, hey, Heat culture. We have to continue to go for it every single year, never sit back. We need to wait. Our whole plan is to wait and get lucky that a star wants to come play for us and only us. And then Jimmy Butler says anyone but Miami, which is funny. But I think that's the real joke of it all, right? Is that they waited too long again on a contract they should have moved in the offseason when you knew you weren't going to give him the extension. Because it's like, I want to get into it in a second on who I feel like is in the right, wrong, whatever percentages, down the middle, whatever have you. But I think when you know that, okay, no one's on the trade market here, no one can be acquired for our assets, right? No one wants who we have, at least players that we want in that hierarchy. We can't get in those bidding wars. We just can't. We can't get a Mikal Bridges. We can't get a Karl Anthony Towns. Not that the Heat would want them anyway, but those are the upper echelon of players that were available this offseason or last offseason, and they wouldn't have even been able to get in the negotiating room because of their current depreciated assets. At that point, you have to look in the mirror and say, all right, maybe Jimmy's going to want this extension. We've already talked to him and his agent about it. We're not too happy about doing that because, like you said, Harry, he hasn't given you 100% in the previous regular seasons. And that's not necessarily, I mean, it is his fault for doing that, but I don't blame him for not going 100% of the time in your mid-30s in a game in, December. Like, I don't blame him for that. But that's once you know that decision, you need to act. Because when you sit on your hands, you're now left with this where you knew who Jimmy was. You knew he'd make a stink, especially after Pat Riley said everything he said about him in the end of your press conference. Like, you had to know that was going to rub him the wrong way. And if you don't, you're just as stupid as you look.
The other part of it, LJ, and I guess it's like 2 separate parts that I was thinking as you were saying that, is Jimmy goes out of his way last summer and really wants Dame, recruits Dame. Like, obviously, Dame and Bam are close from being on the Olympic teams, but Jimmy was the one who was like, yes, I need the help. Dame through Shams says he wants only Miami. And obviously all of the, shit flows from that. At the point where Dame lands in Milwaukee, how do they not look around and say, is it time to move Jimmy, right? Like, we try, whatever their excuse is, because I don't think they ever put the best offer on the table or approached it in a way where they were dealing with, like, even if you knew that Cronin was a fucking shitster, like, there were ways to make that work. Miami's package, believe it or not, was better than anything they received and could have been better than, and it would have been, like, objectively. I don't care what all the Boston media BS.
Hero would have been the best piece in that deal. Look how he's playing this year. He's playing good. Like,
yeah. So I mean, it's just, and again, if he didn't want Hero because they have too many guards, which doesn't make sense when you're trying to collect assets. Who cares how many shooting guards you have?
you're not competing for a championship.
Yeah,
if you have 5 all-star caliber guards on your roster, do you think you wouldn't, or you have like 3 all-star caliber guards? Not that they do, but you wouldn't want a 4th. Just you can flip it somewhere else. Like,
it didn't make sense. And at least from what I had heard originally, there were teams that were interested in a Hero package that would have like satisfied what they wanted. So I think kind of what happened was the Heat tapped out at their offer, which was Hero, Duncan, and 2 firsts. And they're like, well, we'll go find something else because if that's all you're offering, we don't want to, for whatever reason, they didn't want to do the right thing for Dame. And so here we are. And I think at that point in time, it would have made sense to say, we failed in this aspect. Like, this is a guy who wanted to be here. We should have gotten something done. We didn't. Jimmy coming off a finals berth. Is this the time to move him? He would have had 2 years on an option left on his deal. Who knows what you could have gone for him to the, going to the right team before the cap got super restrictive. Like, none of this stuff. I had a friend be like, oh, the cap screwed them. It's like,
it's not just them that it's screwed everybody.
LJ, the cap's hurting everyone, and if you've done nothing to acquire assets in the years where it's like, man, you could have, 10 more second round picks, which you see how people are using to trade, like that's a lack of foresight. It's not yes, you can blame the league or the Players Association or whatever for agreeing to a dumb cap that doesn't really help anybody and kind of, really hurts the guys in the middle. It basically helps max guys, and it's, maybe it's getting some money for the guys at the end of roster. It's not helping the guys in the middle, but that's not why they're struggling. And the other part I wanted to mention, and I have no idea if it necessarily factors into what we're saying, but like, I think you have a problem in the league if you're treating the ownership of a team as a business. Yes, it is a business, but if you're treating it as like, how much money can I make? I don't think those are the best owners in sports. Like, yes, you'd like
literally the Chicago Bulls owner operates that way, and that's why all Bulls fans hate him.
So yeah, I mean, my issue with Mickey is when, they want to make the playoffs every year because like that's a good amount of money to put back in his pocket. Like, in addition to what they make during the regular season, the arena's open, they're selling more merch. Like that, the seats are ridiculously expensive. They're making a lot of money, even if there's even if it's only 2 or 3 playoff games at home. They're making money. And that's what they're doing. Like, this is, there were years where it would have made sense to pay the tax a little bit, to dip into the pocket and find other guys that kind of complemented Bam and Jimmy and these other guys. And we didn't do that. And it was always like, oh, the fit's not right. This, man, if you're pulling, if your idea is, and I'm sorry he got hurt, but if your idea was like Drew Smith's going to be a big part of this team, that's what we need. That's what we want. Like,
you're already behind the 8 ball by a mile.
And we knew that there were guys who were interested in being here who are waiting on, and we're just playing this waiting game. And we've never signed anyone, on this waiting game.
That was the whole thing why Jimmy got really mad too, because it came out in the Shams article that Jimmy was upset that the front office didn't do more to get him help, and then people are going to say, well, Kyle Lowry. But it's like, if Kyle Lowry is the biggest piece that you get in your star's like 6-year tenure with your team, okay that he asked for a bad player to come join that didn't work out, that absolves you of the other 5 fucking years where you didn't do anything.
It's also the Kyle thing was such an easy move to make. Like,
it made sense at the time.
Goran got hurt. You didn't know how he was coming back. They wanted Precious, who unfortunately didn't have a great rookie season and has had a very middling NBA career. And Goran for the salary. And I think what did they end up getting? A second round pick because it was tampering or like something. So,
yeah. Wasn't Mark Cuban like banging the desk about that?
Right, because originally we were supposed to send Goran to Dallas, and then that was a whole other thing. So, and he blew up that trade. But essentially, I just think that the Heat in general has really underachieved in terms of bringing the correct talent around Jimmy, because Jimmy playing the way he did with Bam, defending the way he was, and Bam's been a pretty good playoff riser. He's played better in the postseason than he has in the regular season. They didn't need to make a lot of moves, and they just really came up short there. So I blame them for a lot of where we are now. And so for the fans who are like, oh, Jimmy's finally doing the Jimmy thing, like, you knew who you were getting. There wasn't any surprises. You got him so cheap because he got traded to the Sixers for, pennies on the dollar. And then they were too stupid to max him out when that's all he wanted. And you would have never seen him in Miami if they had offered him the 5-year max. So, their stupid coach chose Ben Simmons over him. So, or
Tobias Harris.
Tobias Harris over me. So, I think to pretend that the Heat are this, like, very crafty maneuvering. Listen, the best thing the Heat have done in my lifetime, the two best moves they've made are drafting Dwayne Wade and making sure they had 3 max slots so that Wade, LeBron, and Bosh could all sign. Those are the two best moves they made.
And they're trying to do the similar thing in 2026, but free agency's dead. It doesn't operate that way. So it's just another example of them mentally being stuck in the past and not adjusting to the new way the NBA works, the same way Spo does his stupid small ball in 2025. Like, it's over, bro. Pack it up.
It's dead. And if they don't have the space, like when they got Jimmy, they had made the mistake of signing Dion and JJ. So, they had to give up that first round pick, which now will most likely come due this year to OKC, because that went to the Clippers and then they moved it in the Paul George trade to OKC.
Which is funny that OKC winds up with another one.
Yeah. So, I mean, and actually originally it was 2023, and then we decided to move it, which, looking back, I remember Albert had written an article saying, like, what are the Heat doing? And I was like, well, they must be doing it for something. And now you're like, well, actually they did nothing with it. So again,
it's the Apollo one, right?
Yeah. So again,
just let it expire.
Right. So again, you're just kind of like, I remember, like, I used to give them the benefit of the doubt, like Terry Rozier trade. I'm like, great, they got another move coming on. Or, they're moving 2023 to 2025. There's got to be something, maybe they really like someone in 2023 or what. I don't think there's any forethought. And I don't think an objective, reasonable person can come on. Like, if we brought someone on the pod who's a big Heat front office guy, I don't think they could sit there and really say, this was well thought out. This was well planned. This is exactly what they were doing. Like, at no point in time were the Heat the favorite to win the title. At any point, even with 2 finals appearances, right? They were never favored against LeBron and AD. Maybe things are different if Bam and Goran don't get hurt, but we have no idea. And in the Nuggets series, while the Nuggets had a pretty easy path to the West the year they won, we didn't really have anyone to match up with, Jokic or Murray or these guys. They really beat the crap out of us. So
especially Aaron Gordon. Oh crap! I hear an echo on your end. Aaron Gordon and what's his name, and Michael Porter Jr. on the boards, because again, small ball. Well, how do we lose against Los Angeles, Harry? Small ball, they couldn't rebound. What happened against Denver? Small ball, they couldn't rebound. What happened against the Celtics? And these are conference finals. Al Horford, Rob Williams. And then next time around, last year, Kristaps Porzingis, they couldn't rebound. Oh, funny. Stop me if you've heard it before. But I guess if I have to put numbers on it, I think both are, like you said, both are wrong. Probably both parties, I'd say, have made their fair share of mess ups. I don't think Jimmy would make things this ugly, but obviously he's done it multiple times before, so I probably should have seen it coming. But if I had to put a number on it, I'd say probably 65-45. As far as blame goes, I'd say front office 65, Jimmy 45. And that's honestly the main argument against Jimmy is that he's under contract still.
10%.
What? Wait, did I say 65?
35.
35. 65, 35. Fuck. I literally did that in my head, and it's 12:30 a.m. So excuse me. But I honestly think it's the only argument is he's under contract still for this year and an option for next year. He should do his job, but Pat Riley's employed, right? Same organization. He has the same job, not the same job, but he has a job under the same organization, and he hasn't done his job successfully in years. So where does that leave us? How do you like that argument? Both have a job to do. I don't think either of them are doing their jobs. Pat's been the culprit in every single breakup of this franchise's superstars. That's a pattern. Acknowledge the pattern. Those who do not understand or acknowledge history are doomed to repeat history. And if your resort really is that, like, I don't think that Pat's the one calling the shots anymore. Like, because I've seen a lot of people say that when you point the finger at Pat Riley right now, like, well, he's almost 90 years old. He's probably not the one calling the shots. And it's like, yeah, okay, that's probably fair. He probably doesn't have the final say or the majority say over everything that happens like he did like 10 years ago. And that's probably fair. But then my response to that is, okay, identify the person that does. Who's the person doing it now? Because they're making all the mistakes then. No matter what you say, there's just too many yes men in the Miami Heat organization right now, in my opinion, especially on the coaching staff, because, and so many people have said that too. This isn't like an unpopular opinion that they need fresh ideas on the bench, because you have all these players. You have Tyler Hero that people say is a star. You have Bam Adebayo that people say is a star. You have Jaime Jaquez Jr. that people say is a rising star. You have Nikola Jovic that people are saying is a rising star. Okay, why does our offense suck ass? All these rising stars and stars, why can't they average 100 points a game?
It's the truth is that they're all decent players. I wouldn't say any of them. I know you're obviously being facetious, but
only a little bit.
None of them are stars. They're like, they're good. I think at best they're 6 men, probably more like 7, 8 men, and that's not bad. Like drafting a rotation player, as a lottery pick, or for Jovic, late. Jovic was like late first round. Yeah, so
one of the last.
Those are hits in terms of, draft hits. It's just you need the talent, you need the star, and they're not doing it. And the other question you asked, and I realized I didn't answer it at all, was the Jimmy thing in terms of like expecting him to come back if they can't find a deal. How is that going to work, man? Like we've seen it with James Harden when he wants a deal, like he'll show up because he doesn't want his money. He wants his money. But are you expecting a guy who you've accused of not playing hard to suddenly like dive after loose balls and give it his all if he doesn't want to be there? Like, is he going to cost the team more by being out there? Is he going to cause locker room issues? You do have young guys in the locker room who, this is their second and third. Do you want a guy who might intentionally be a cancer around the locker room? You could suspend him for 7 games because that's probably the max under the CBA, but and I know they were appealing it. I didn't really hear what happened in that aspect, but you get to the point where, and Jimmy's being tough too. If you say, like you mentioned, if he says anywhere but Miami, but suddenly it's Phoenix only, and literally the only guy Phoenix can trade based on their cap restrictions being over the second apron is Beal, you have to both. There's 3 parts to that trade.
And it's funny, though, too, to interrupt you really quick. Remember when Dame and his agent said that? Only Miami, and then Adam Silver came out with a memo from the NBA. Have we seen that yet?
Oh, of course. It's not benefiting Miami, so why would they?
It's only hindering them, so Adam Silver is just going to, pretend I do not see.
Yeah.
Fucking idiot.
Yeah, I actually think it's interesting that Jimmy said, at least leaked, no Memphis, no Bucks, and like those are things that got Dame in trouble. So
the exact things that got Dame in trouble with a memo hours later.
Listen, hypocrisy is always going to rule the day, and I think this Beal thing is interesting because, one, while you could find a bad team that can't get free agents who might want to take on his contract, and I was watching some of the Suns Hawks game tonight purely for academic reasons, for no other reasons, obviously.
Surely academic, of course.
Purely academic. I thought he looked pretty good tonight. Like he's still, even though I thought it's weird to bring him off the bench and he was playing like long stints, which I seems weird for a guy who's obviously been in the league for a long time. Like he's still crafty. He can get to the basket. I could see a team watching him and selling themselves on him. Here's the caveat with him. He has a no trade clause. He would have to approve wherever he's going. As of now, his agent, Bartelstein, who's actually, he does have a good relationship with the Heat from past signings and stuff, they would have to okay wherever he goes. So he'd have to like where he's going next. So I don't know if he'd want to go to a Detroit who's up and coming, who looks better this year with a better coaching situation. Like, is that a team he wants to go to? I'm not sure. The other part is, are the Heat getting enough back for the Beal pieces that would be traded to them that they feel satisfied letting Jimmy go? Because in their head, they're probably thinking, we can wait out the year and whatever. We'll figure out what happens, whether we make the playoffs and give up the pick or don't make the playoffs and keep the pick. And we wait till the offseason where Jimmy has an interesting choice to make. Does he opt in for $51 million and the Heat could say, hey, man, part of opting in, we're going to send you anywhere because we could have worked out a sign and trade. That's what we wanted to do. That's our preference. And the other part is, if Jimmy wants that extra year and wants the extra $50 million, who is paying him that money after he opts in? Like, God forbid he gets hurt. God forbid he's not that good. God forbid the market isn't that good and they can't afford to pay Jimmy $50 million. His option, it might be better for him to opt out, do a sign and trade for 3 years with 2 guaranteed, and he makes more money that way than he would opting in and then hoping the market's there for him the year after. There's a lot of risk involved for Jimmy as an older guy, obviously near the end of his career. And I think the Heat know that. And I think they both like kind of believe they have the upper hand. Like Jimmy can be a fucking bitch and complain and ruin the season for them. And the Heat could say, hey man, we don't really care. Like, you're under contract. We're happy to not pay you. Mickey's happy to pocket the money if he doesn't want to show up and get suspended. He just saved $3 million, I think almost $4 million from this suspension. So
it's the best news he's heard since 2013.
So Mickey's loving it, man. And it's just kind of this, like, you know, and the Heat aren't getting good offers because of Jimmy's reputation, because it's a 1-year deal, because, you know, I have a feeling that Memphis trade probably could have happened. That made a ton of sense for all parties. They're kind of.
I don't think it was a coincidence that their odds jumped drastically, and then an hour later, you see, Jimmy's nuked the Memphis. He's no, I'm not going to Memphis, and like the trade would have made sense too. Like for the Heat's perspective, it would have made some sense.
You know that Memphis could use a small forward. You got Jock, you know, in and out of injuries. There, JJJ's having a decent season, but they'd only have to trade like Smart, maybe Kennard, another salary and a pick or something, and you probably had a deal. I can't imagine that he would have been too pissed off with that. So, you know, they can make that decision. They could make the deal, and Memphis can say, we don't even need you for, you know, we're not even looking beyond. We want you for 3 months to see if we can do this thing. And Jimmy can say no all he wants. But again, like you said, the NBA kind of told Dame he needs to show up. They would say the same thing to Jimmy. I don't think those things would change. And you can't really have, while it's worked in the past for Harden and other guys, you can't really have guys saying, I'm not going to report or something. That's obviously not good for the league and for trade values just like trades happening going forward. So, I mean, we're kind of in the standoff. I guess it's been 1 week since the trade, because I was at the Panthers game when the news broke. I found that if I wear a Panther shirt to the game, they don't really win. So I wear something else red, and I was wearing a Heat jacket. So I heard people around me talking about Jimmy and stuff.
And what happened? What was the result of that Panthers hockey game?
An excellent shootout victory over the Pittsburgh Penguins. So
yeah.
Sorry. But but yeah, I mean, it's really this rock and a hard place, and it's always their own doing. It's always their own doing. There's never like some weird, unfortunate thing. Like the best thing that happened to the Heat, like since Jimmy got there in terms of basketball, not for the rest, but like it was COVID. They needed that break so badly. That team they were so bad after the trade for Jay and Iggy, and they were losing games. I think they got killed by Charlotte the night that
yeah. Well, they announced it later that same night, because that was the Rudy microphone incident that same night.
So like that time to gel and figure it out and go to a venue where it was basketball only, like that helped the Heat. That was really helpful for them. Other than that, like random crazy thing that happened, like they've hurt themselves in every aspect. Like,
the last time they did really good was the number 1 seed, and what was that, 2022, I think?
Right. And then after that year where they went badly and they lose to the Celtics and they lose 3 or 4 on their home court, like
that's the year that Jimmy asked. That's the year that he started asking every offseason, hey, I need a little bit of help.
But no changes. Like PJ Tucker leaves, and you're like, while I didn't love Tucker by the end of that season because he had like 3 separate injuries in the postseason.
He just got too banged up. His age started to show.
Oh, that's because he was doing so much in the regular season, which is again why it would be nice to have like another star to handle the load, like
and all the role players were at peak value that year. I remember all of us were so excited for John Collins.
And then LJ, they almost friggin' inked Caleb Martin to a huge deal this summer for no reason. Thank God his agent's a moron and thought there was a bigger market for him. Because could you imagine paying Caleb Martin it would have been less this year and then more, but like the equivalent of $15 million a season for Caleb Martin?
They're just really out of touch, which goes back to my earlier point of their thought process is dated, and it's not a hard thing to fix. Like you're not literally trying to get. This is an ironic. What do you call? The word is escaping me. Metaphor, technically, but like you're not asking someone that's 6 foot tall to play center. Like that's something you can't fix. Oh, he can't do it. It's not going to happen. This 6 foot player is not going to be able to get 10 rebounds for you. It's not something that like fundamentally can't change. You can change your thought process and change the way that you go about doing business on who you offer deals, the length of deals, when you move off of a player. I don't have to preach to you. You've literally pioneered the whole get off of the player at their max value point for a couple second round picks because look how valuable they are now. But I want to shift the conversation just quickly to asking you, did they fail Jimmy? Because this was a very easy answer. I want to say a week ago before he had that press conference when it was very clear that the front office were the bad guys. And now to the casual fan, Jimmy's come off as a little bit of a dick, but we kind of knew that he would do that. But
yeah, I think LJ, I think it's like dating someone who's super toxic that your friends told you was going to hurt you and then being surprised that it ends in a fiery blaze, right? Like that's where you're at. Like you were warned, you knew this, you kind of got with the person because of those issues. They wouldn't have been available to date in my analogy or available to, be on your team if they weren't that personality, that, that kind of firecracker personality. So
it's the, what do you call it? It's the girlfriend syndrome of I can fix him. That's literally all it is. Yeah.
So, I mean, did they fail Jimmy? Yes. I mean, of course, I think it would be impossible to argue that they didn't. Did Jimmy gain a lot from being a member of the Heat? Did his Hall of Fame stock go up? Did his notoriety go up? Did his, his image as a basketball player go? Of course, like he has benefited from being on the Miami Heat. He would say the same thing. Anyone else would say that, but did the Heat fail him? Did they promise him that we're going to build a team to win championships? Did they do that for him? Absolutely not. And did they? I guess my issue with them, we've talked about it, is like I don't even think they like swung and missed. Like making a trade for Kyle, not making another trade for a player for 3 seasons, that player being, in exchange for Lowry, and that player being Terry Rozier, who while was having a very good year in Charlotte, he's kind of the player he is. He's going to take a lot of shots. There are going to be games where a lot of them don't go in.
Most games.
And to think that he and Tyler can work together, I'm still confused about why Spo is starting them together when it seemed like he was doing okay off the bench. He didn't seem to have. The one thing I'll say about Rozier is he doesn't seem to be he's been a team player. He does not seem to have an issue like starting off the bench. Like I think he's happy in Miami, so I'll give him credit for that. But in terms of team building, and if Hero's making this, to me, it's still a very small leap. While he's had a good season, you look at some of these games and you're like, this is the same guy. Like on the nights where he's efficient and he's hitting well, great, but they've lost a lot of those games too because other players around him aren't necessarily benefiting from his play. And so we're just kind of at this very frustrating crossroad, which could have been avoided because they didn't look ahead. And the other part that annoys me, LJ, is if they had traded for Jimmy, made 2 finals, didn't win, but then decided, you know what, he's been great here, but let's trade him at the height of our value and get something else that eventually might have led to another piece, I think you could argue it was a win-win all the way around. You didn't win a championship, but you did everything else that you could do, and you moved off at the right time, to go into the phase after Jimmy. And we could be having a discussion about what's next for the Heat, but we're just stuck in this this purgatory where they want to make the postseason. So as long as this core is together, this is a 6, 7, 8 seed at best, probably a play-in team. If they have an off night, they're going home. And while that would benefit me this season, that's not what they want. But there's no movement, right? Like the Celtics are a class ahead of them. I have no idea how Cleveland's going to finish this year, but like hard to argue against it. Hard to argue about a team that's 32-4.
Last time they lost, you know who the last team to beat them was, though?
Did we beat them?
Yeah. We're the only team to beat them in the last 2 months.
Yeah. So it's like, I watched that game last night, just incredible basketball. And I think the worst part about being a Heat fan now is when you watch other games that are awesome and you're like, we're playing different sports, man.
I want that.
We are not, whatever the Heat are doing in these 95 to 91 bar fights is not the sport I want to be watching compared to the Cavs and the Thunder, who had 93 points with 3 minutes left in the third last night. So
they're playing chess. We're playing checkers.
Just watching these games, and listen, while I think the Thunder coach is excellent, and obviously Kenny Atkinson is the coach now with Cleveland, right? So they're obviously good coaches. I wouldn't think they're better than Spo, but they're absolutely better regular season coaches than Spo.
Career-wise, they're definitely not. But yeah, you're talking about this year alone. Take your sample size. Spo's having the worst coaching season of his career.
Spo needs something or a hobby or
get that man a hobby.
Yeah,
get him into crafting. That's popular down there, right? Like people like arts and crafts. There's a big art district.
Yeah, let's go down to Wynwood, give him a paintbrush. Let's just see what happens. Like
maybe he's artistic. Maybe he is.
I thought you were gonna say something else, but yeah, no,
he's looked like it this year.
but yeah, and just I'm really trying to take a step back because, to be honest with you, watching the games has frustrated me. So I take a lot of nights where I'm just like, I'm not gonna watch, and then if we need to talk about it, or I'll watch those quick highlights, which are great. You can basically see the whole game in an hour. I can do it while I'm working. I get enough of what I need. It's the same story every night, and we can discuss it. But I think for the Heat, they'd be doing a real disservice to the franchise. So not the team this year, because I don't want them to make the postseason, and not the fans or whatever. A real disservice to the franchise if they can't find a way to move on from Jimmy, get enough pieces to make it work, and just get out of this. Like, it feels like they're in this funk that is totally their own doing. They've made all the mistakes to be here, and they're not doing what they need to do to get out of the funk. I guess if a person was in a funk, they're not, exercising or seeking counseling or doing whatever you would need to do to get out of this like state of being kind of blue.
I guess you could say the front office has the yips, right? Because they haven't made a good move in a while. And then when they do make an occasional good move like Alec Burks or something, they just don't really play him that much.
Yeah. And also
recently they played more on this road trip because obviously no Jimmy means that's a lot of minutes. That's like 30 something minutes.
But also, why wouldn't you just, in my opinion, so if we agree like Burks is a decent move, why wouldn't you just sign all these like okay vets, See how they play. And when a team comes calling and they're like, "Yo, will you give up a second round pick for an Alec Burks for Richardson's been terrible, but if that move had worked out or something like, of course, like that's what
if they get rid of Jimmy this offseason, I think that's what you're going to see for next year because, like I said earlier, they're gearing up for the summer of 2026, hoping that maybe players don't re-sign or the free agency has a bit of a revival. That's what I'm not saying that's what is going to happen. Obviously, you know what I mean? I'm just saying that's their game plan. Their game plan is to gear up for 2026. And that means next year, do what you're saying. Sign some of those vets to fill up the Jimmy cap, right? The Jimmy cap on expiring deals. Ship them off at the trade deadline, get a couple picks to recoup, and then sign your big fish that summer. I guess.
In my opinion, this is, and they're not the same in terms of like franchise and respectability, but the Dolphins and the Heat are really reminding me of each other.
Right now, yes.
Very stagnant, stubborn front offices. It is not working for either team, and they will not make a change. I don't think they'll ever force Pat Riley out, but like, it's time, my man. Step down. Let's get in some new blood. Let's get in some new people who can, get in there and just think a bit differently. In terms of the Dolphins, it's the same thing. Like, you can't go 10 years without an offensive line. And you look at every team that's good in the postseason. They're running the ball down your throat. Like, if they get the ball.
Except the Steelers.
Sorry. If they get the ball. If they get the ball. I did see a funny tweet that was saying, like, kind of incredible the Steelers are the worst team in the playoffs 2 years in a row. So sorry.
Yep. Hey, standard is the standard, baby.
So I think, if you realize things weren't working, you make a change. Is it a change for the sake of a change? You don't know that until you make the move. And if you find out it was, so be it. You'll figure it out going on. But to sit in this, this is really crude, but I feel like they've just shit their pants and they won't go get a new pair of underwear.
It's funny because the person in charge probably wears diapers. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
No,
that was a joke.
But I just think that's where we are. Like, you've shit your pants. It's super embarrassing. You don't need to tell anybody. Everyone kind of knows because they can smell it. Like, instead of just getting up, showering yourself off, and getting a new pair of pants and being like, you know what? I'm not going to shit my pants again. They just are sitting in it and not moving off of it. And I just came up with that because I literally am just laughing thinking about it.
They festering in their own fucking fecal matter.
That's what it is. They crap their pants. They are not, and they just won't fix it. And they're like, you know what? I'm gonna sit in my shit, and this is what I deserve. And it's just like, well, we don't deserve this. The fans don't deserve to smell your shit and to look.
It's literally that old video of that kid playing. I think it's I don't know, he's playing Roblox or something, and the mom comes in and goes, "You shit your pants. Go to the bathroom now." He goes, "No, I'm playing. I can't pause the game now." It's literally, and she keeps yelling at him, "Change your pants. You shit yourself." And he just keeps saying, "No, not right now. No."
Yeah, I really think that's kind of where we are. And they keep like you said, maybe it is the yips. They can't seem to make a right move. Even the signings, and people are like that. They signed Josh Richardson, who seemed like that wouldn't be a bad vet to have last year. He gets hurt.
He was playing really good before he got hurt too. That's the sad part. He's actually doing really good.
Opting in, you're like, shoot, or that's a roster spot. They signed Thomas Bryant. He's I think he's starting for the Pacers now.
He had a great game. He had 22. He dropped a 20-piece, dude.
Because Turner was out. So you're just like, maybe there's
damned if you do.
Maybe there's just something in the water down here, and it could be feces. So
it could be their own shit.
I just think it's time to get up, just shower it off, rinse it off. It's okay to fail. I think that's kind of where we're at. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to fail. No one's going to fault you for failures. They will fault you for not learning from your mistakes. They will fault you from not adapting to the new NBA. They will fault you from not realizing that this Jimmy situation is, again, just another iteration of a star overstaying his welcome, right? Like you mentioned very early in the pod, what the Wade issue was simply They needed to just give him the Kobe deal and not worry about it. That was what they needed to do, and they didn't, and he left. With with Shaq, that extension we knew was bad the moment he signed it, that 5-year, $100 million. We knew, he kind of got lazy immediately after winning the championship, and that season after was so that first night, the game after the championship get blown out on their home court.
Chicago.
Yeah, after they won in 2006. So, you knew that was
get blown out in the playoffs by
Yes.
Chicago again.
Of course, you wait to the point where he gets mad and you get like Sean Marion and whatever. So you get really nothing for him, and then that turns into Jermaine. So it's just, I want to end it like this, LJ, unless there's other things you want to talk about. But I think it's kind of like the Heat are a successful franchise. They've had a very good start to their existence since starting in 1988. The last decade, will specifically point to LeBron leaving, which I kind of think was always going to happen.
Yes.
He
was always going to go back to Cleveland, always.
Has just been like, let's keep us afloat enough and good enough where we can compete, which essentially just means make the postseason and hope for the best. And we're going to be content with that, but we're going to call it Heat culture, and we're going to like sell shirts, and that's who we're going to be. We're going to be the hardest working, best conditions. We're going to take guys off the streets and really turn them into good players. Like Max Strus is a very good contributor for the Cavs, and
he's the only one that's beaten the allegations lately.
Yeah. So I just think we're just in this kind of rut, and it's time to clean ourselves off and stop pretending that it's fine, because it isn't. It hasn't been, and it's time to figure this out. And does it mean taking a little less for Jimmy? Maybe. I mean, I'm not, you don't need to take on high money, because again, maybe we discussed this in the last pod, or I've mentioned on like a playback or something, but teams know the Heat are not going to pay the tax next year and the year after because of the repeater tax and the implications of that. So they're in a rock and a hard place. They can't sit there and be like, oh yeah, we can do this. They know they don't want, money beyond probably no contracts beyond 1 to 2 years, because at least 2 years they can figure out what to do with an expiring deal before the tax bill comes due. So they're in a tough spot. They know it. Jimmy knows it. Other teams know it. But I think it is time to look around, get the best deal possible, even if it's like scraps for Beal as a third team, if that ends up being something that Beal agrees to. And just moving on, a clean break. I don't see how bringing him back is going to help the team, and I don't see how waiting till the summer, even if you think you might get more, I don't know how much more you're going to get. And
it's a gamble they shouldn't take.
And I don't know how it's going to. I'm not big into. We've heard people, and we've talked about it before, when I thought trades should have been made, and they're like, well, they're winning, you can't mess with chemistry. That shit is bullshit. Winning breeds chemistry. So there could be guys who don't like each other, but if they're winning, if they're good on the court, that will fix everything. If they're great friends, but they're not winning, that's going to cause issues.
Then you just look like the last 4 iterations of the Los Angeles Lakers.
Yeah, I'm sure the Suns guys are friendly. Like, I'm sure the Booker Beal, I think they like each other. They seem to like each other on the court. But if they don't win, there are going to be issues over there. And with the Heat, it's the same kind of thing. Like, if Jimmy brings down this team and you poison the well for other guys who, you're trying to decide whether you're going to extend them or not, for the next guys who want to come in, this, like you mentioned at the very beginning, this is the 4th star that's had some issue on the way out. Like, people are going to
set the precedent.
People are going to start looking around, and no one necessarily wants to play for a franchise that's just sitting in shit. And I just think it's time to move on from that, and it's time to just do a clean break, even if it's not the best package, and let's move on to the next phase and see where we go. And if 2026 is the plan, like, why aren't we gaining as many assets as possible to be ready to make that move, whatever the next move might be?
That's what I think they'll probably do. Is they'll plan for that, and then honestly, I think it's a pretty good place to wrap it there. I'll give my own take on what they should basically do then we can close it out here. You've gotten not a massive sample size, right, from the Jimmy suspension. We still have a couple more games to go, but you've been able to see that this team offensively flat out sucks without Jimmy. They beat the Jazz, right? Their most recent game, they just beat the Jazz in Utah, avenging that 36-point loss in Miami. That was good. That was good to see, at least from a schematic standpoint. But I'm trying to think of a nice way to put it. They are a mediocre early 2000s offense. In the modern NBA today, that makes you a very bad offense without Jimmy Butler. That's what they are. They needed double overtime to break 110 against the Kings. They had a good game in Golden State because they shot lights out. That's going to happen sometimes when you shoot as much as they do. That's the predicament that they're in. You've seen what you look like without Jimmy Butler. It's a very good draft. You lose, like you said, you lose your pick if you make the playoffs this year, but then you get your next year's pick back. And I've seen a lot of people recently saying that next draft is actually just as, if not more talented than the current one. So it's like, it's take your pick of the litter, I guess, technically. But I don't know if I definitely trust them if they get into that position of a top 13 pick. I trust them. It's when they get beyond that where things get a little difficult. But if they get there, I trust them to make the right pick. It's just, I don't have patience. Major flaw of mine, hand up, honesty hour. I'd rather get that nice pick in this year's draft and then see what they can do to get a year of experience under that player's belt before you probably, take a step back next year, because you're going to just not be able to win. I mean, it's tough because the East doesn't let you fall very far. Everyone in the East is so bad that you have to be like really bad to not make the play-in in the East. But that's their predicament, right? That's their bed. They have to lay in it. I think that's probably a good place to end it, though. That's where we stand, at least me and Harry. Not everybody in the basement agrees with us. We don't agree with everybody in the basement, but I think on a lot of things that were covered tonight is a pretty overarching agreement point that, yeah, it's probably time to let go of Jimmy. They should have done it a little earlier, but both parties are definitely at fault for the way that this has crumbled so publicly. But that's all we have for you today, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. I don't know when the next time we're going to see you. It might be in 6 months. I don't know. We'll see what happens. George wasn't here, though. George died again. He's on his fourth life. He's a cat. But thanks so much for tuning in, guys. Take care. We love you. Be good people. Bye.
And stop sitting and shit. Go take a shower.
Need a stop and a rebound. Fournier for three.
Oh, my.
That was the Random Scrub Heat podcast.